What attachment did you have in your childhood that has a pattern that now manifests in your adult life? Find out the details here today on Jimmy Rants. Click on that little box down there in the corner. It will take you straight to IGTV for today's episode. JimmyRants.com is the website. And as always, you can engage live in the content. Go follow me. I'm over on Instagram. I am at Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, engage live. We are here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So thank you so much for being here. We also simulcast live over here on my Facebook page. Thank you guys for being here, as well as over on my YouTube channel. Thank you guys. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. If you missed a live, you can watch it on replay over here. It's on IGTV on Instagram. We also put the past episodes up over on YouTube. If you type in a keyword Jimmy Rants, you will find the show. Today is Thursday, so Thursday is Real Talk Podcast Day. And so with my podcasts on Wednesday and Thursday, I actually post the video of it as a Jimmy Rants bonus episode over on YouTube. Today I've got this lady named Carmen Hunter on, and Carmen is basically a trauma survivor and has a lot of experience with trauma and even helping clients. She's a health coach. She helps clients kind of put the pieces together with how their trauma is impacting their physical health, and that if they're having some trouble losing weight or getting pain under control or some health issue under control, dealing with the trauma fixes that. So we had a really great conversation on the Real Talk podcast today. So go listen over on llvlc.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, or watch the Jimmy Rants bonus episode over on YouTube. And then finally, pop on over to the official website for this show. It is jimmyrants.com. And while you're there, you can see all the past episodes. This is number 598. So we're about to hit number 600 coming up on Monday. But yeah, you can see all the past episodes there. And if you like what I do here, throw me a little bit of money through Patreon, a monthly donation, or a one-time gift through PayPal, and any donation of any amount would be greatly appreciated. Again, those links, jimmyrants.com. Okay, you guys, I have been really interested lately in why people are the way they are. Why do they believe the way they do? Why do they act the way they do? Why do they see the same situation that another person sees, and they look at it through a totally different prism, even though it's the same event? So I've been very interested in a lot of this. I've been doing quite a few little posts on social media, kind of articulating some of my thoughts about these kinds of things. I've gotten very philosophical in 2020, and so I'm going to keep being that way. And today I want to bring up a topic on Jimmy Rants that kind of extends upon that, because we all interact with one another in very different ways. And so I wanted to kind of get to the root cause of why do we interact with each other in the way that we do. And of course, you could predict, I guess, commonsensically that, okay, you learned patterns when you were younger, and then those patterns became the way you thought. And so there is this thing called attachment pattern. An attachment pattern is how you view the world based on how the world was presented to you, especially when you were in your developing years. And a lot of that mental development that takes place happens when you're a kid, and you're very impressionable at that age. And of course, then you become an adult. Do you change that attachment pattern? Probably not. Most people, when you get an attachment pattern that you learn from childhood, you take it well into adulthood with you. And so we're going to talk about that here today. What childhood attachment pattern did you learn that you still hold on today? And how, if you become self-aware of your attachment pattern, how can you change it? How can you, if it's detrimental to you, how can you make it so it works to your advantage? So I have a nice little article here today all about this idea of what might be wrong about your attachment pattern. And if you just joined us, we all learned skills and views on the world and all the everything about our lives when we were kids, and how you interacted with people and what you learned about people as a child, you have now taken into adulthood. So we're going to see what might be wrong about some of the attachment patterns that you learned, and then how you can correct them. So this is from Psychology Today, one of my favorite places to read Jimmy Rant's articles. I do all kinds of these kinds of articles, and Psychology Today is just brilliant. I should basically tell them, hey, can I just be like a regular that you send stuff to? Because I'm going to do Jimmy Rants on these topics that are really important, and this is a really, really important one. So, you may be wrong about your attachment pattern is the headline. Knowing your attachment pattern can change your relationships. This could be seminal today, you guys, in helping you understand why you act the way you do around other people, why other people react the way they do around you, and how you recognize it and how you change it. One of the most profound influences on the way we behave in relationships is our early attachment patterns. As children, the attachment patterns we formed were based on all the adaptations that we made in order to feel secure in our environment. Think about that. Everything you learned about interactions, attachments to people, or disassociations with people or whatever, were all based on what makes me feel most secure. What kind of relationship do I have with other people that I feel the most comfortable and the most safe? Now, as the survivor of childhood trauma from 14 until 17 and a half, I literally had just turned 14, went to live with my dad, got out of the house at 17 and a half, went straight to college, never went back. I had that 3.5 year period where I had to adapt to my situation, knowing that I was living with a psychopath who would beat me and yell at me and all the things with me. And so that was a major part of my attachment pattern. I learned how to feel safe by avoidance and by not being around someone that I knew could cause harm to me, either mentally, psychologically, physically, whatever. And so they're right. You do just want to feel secure. So whatever that takes. The ways we were cared for and related to by our parents or our primary caretakers led us to develop this internal working model of how others are likely to react to us and how we should react to have our needs met. This is very interesting. So a lot of kids notice how the adults treat them. And if the adults treat them with love and respect and kindness and givingness and understanding, yet still firm with you got to follow the rules and all that, then they realize at an early age that in order to be praised, in order to get the things that you need, in order to you're going to be treated well, And so sometimes that attachment pattern takes hold, and then they get out in the real world and they don't get that from other people. So it kind of like, whoa, wait a minute. Mom and dad always loved me and showed kindness to me and gave me, and now I'm out in the real world and people are ugly to me. And so your attachment pattern kind of fooled you into thinking everybody acted the way that they acted in your family. And vice versa. Like when I went to college, that was a culture shock because I had just been abused pretty much on a daily basis, mentally, psychologically, physically, by my dad for 3.5 years. And then I'm sitting in a college classroom, living by myself for the very first time, 17 and a half. And I didn't know how to act. And I didn't know how people were supposed to act around me. All I knew was when I was in trouble, I would get hit. I knew that I would get yelled at for no reason. There were just a lot of things that I learned. And then I go off to college and I find out a lot of those things I learned, with my attachment pattern, totally wrong from the reality. And yet it was my reality at the time. If we had parents who were emotionally available and attuned to us, we most likely formed what's called a secure attachment. So if you had two solid parents in the household, they both loved you and gave you all the attention and love and care and uplifting and encouragement and like normal parents should, then you had a very secure attachment. However, if you had a parent who was emotionally or physically rejecting, absent, or inattentive to our needs, or I would even add abusive towards you, you may now have formed something called avoidant attachment pattern, in which you feel like you had to take care of yourself. There were so many times I got alone in the middle of the field, looking up at the sky and going, God, why? What is happening? Why am I going through this? Why does he hate me when I've done nothing to make him hate me? And so I learned solitude. I learned to look inward and self-sufficiency, so that when I got out of the house, I went to college at 17 and a half. I went to summer, fall, spring, summer, fall, spring, summer, fall, spring. 3 years, I graduated with a BA. And I was motivated by a lot of things. Motivated to prove all those negative things he always said about me were wrong. Motivated to be my own man, so to speak. Even while I was still dealing with some of the hurt and everything about what happened. And that took a long time. I've talked about this many times before, but 15 years to really just kind of come to terms with what happened in that 3.5 year period. And then it's been 15 more years up to now that I have really kind of fully come to terms, and I'm able to heal and move on from that. But I learned avoidant attachment was my pattern very much. And I envy those people who had the secure attachment, because that's all any kid wants, is just to be loved, respected, encouraged, uplifted, all the things. And I realize most people didn't have that either. There's kind of the extremes. Okay, you didn't have Mr. and Mrs. Cleaver from Leave It to Beaver as your parents, but you didn't have Cruella DeVille and Hannibal Lecter as your parents either. So it's like most of us are kind of in that in between, but most of us want love, want respect, want all those things, and yet we didn't learn that those were normal, so that became our attachment pattern. And if you're just joining us, we are talking about attachment patterns, what you learned in childhood, and your interactions with people and how they reacted to you and vice versa became your attachment pattern that now you learned and now you've carried into adulthood today. And sometimes it could be detrimental to you to still hold on to that attachment pattern. So later on in this article I'm reading from psychologytoday.com, I will show you and tell you some of the things about how you can change your attachment pattern, or at least recognize what your attachment pattern is, and it will radically change how you interact with people. Okay, back to the article. In this case, we have found that the best way to get our needs met was to act like we didn't have any needs at all. That's talking about the avoidant attachment. We may even have disconnected from our own awareness of our own needs. So when you're in that survival mode, and that's what I would call avoidant attachment, you're in survival mode. You are in imminent danger. You literally feel like there's nobody on your side but you. Guys, that was Jimmy Moore. Big time. Circa 30-something years ago. I felt like I just got to hang on to get the heck out of here. And if I can get out of here, I'm on my own, but I'll figure it out. And I flailed in leaving that house, that abuser, having that avoidant attachment pattern fully in place. And it took a lot of years to heal from that. If you had a parent who sometimes met your needs, but other times was intrusive or emotionally draining by acting out of their own needs, we may have formed another kind of attachment called ambivalent anxious attachment, in which we become confused and preoccupied. We may have had to cling or seek reassurance, fearing our needs would not get met. My dad had a trick. I haven't talked about this before. My dad had a trick about making me see him in a positive way from time to time. And he would be nice, and he would draw you in, and make it seem like he was normal and all would be going well and and then suddenly he turns to the negative again, and now you're his victim. I was right in the bullseye of his wrath at that point. And of course, I'm right there with him when he's doing that, and so I have no way to escape at that point. So that did make me anxious and preoccupied. Even if he was being nice, I would be terrified of what he was trying to do and what his motivation was. And so you have to cling or seek reassurance, fearing your needs won't get met. That was me. Like, I literally, I mean, I don't want to go too deep in this, but it was tough. Like, you know what he was doing once I started recognizing it. So I probably fell a little bit into the ambivalent anxious attachment as well. Is there were times when he was somewhat of a delight, and then he would turn on me, and then he was anything but a delight at that point. As we grow up, these early attachment patterns may become models for how we expect relationships to work throughout your lives. Think about that for yourself. The way you learned interaction in relationships is how you were treated in your house growing up. And so you expect, because that was the natural pattern in your house, you expect everybody must act that way out there in the real world. Not realizing there's all kinds of people and all kinds of ways they treat you. But because it was so hardwired as a kid, this is how you get treated in relationships. That becomes your attachment type. The behaviors and defenses that you formed as a result of these childhood dynamics sometimes go on to influence you in your future relationships. Friendships, co-workers, love relationships, on and on and on. How you were treated as a kid impacted you once you became adults. And maybe to this day, no matter how old you are, maybe to this day, you're still being guided by that attachment pattern that you learned as a child. People who experience an avoidant attachment with a parent will likely go on to form a dismissive attachment pattern in their adult romantic relationships. If you were just totally avoided and neglected and nobody cared about you, guess what? You're going to be dismissive as an attachment pattern when you find someone you love. And I know people in my life that have teenagers, and they're not going through the best of times in their life. And they're going to grow up and think, okay, the way they're being treated right now by their parents is the way that you treat people when you love them. And so then they're going to get into this other person's life. That other person may have come from a very steady home, secure attachment pattern. And then suddenly you're in their life. There's the infatuation period. Everybody gets fooled by that. And then they get together. They're married a year or two. And then they realize, the secure one realizes, oh my gosh, I'm being dismissed over and over and over again. What did I do wrong? So then it creates this kind of negative dynamic between the two. And then he's like, well, what's going on? Oh, no, nothing. Oh, I'm just loving you. I don't feel love. But I learned how to love by being detached and dismissive. That's how you love. And that's where a lot of strife happens. Is this helping anybody right now? Like, maybe you're kind of going, oh crap, I didn't even realize how powerful that childhood attachment pattern really was. And that it kind of dictates how you view the world today. A person with an ambivalent anxious attachment pattern as a child will be prone to form a preoccupied attachment. So someone who's always worried about every little thing. And we know those people in our lives. But they're that way because they had the good cop, bad cop parent. Sometimes they'd be pretty nice, and then sometimes they'd be not so nice. So you were always on edge, walking on eggshells. Many people are curious about which attachment category applies to them, along with the psychological defenses they form that interfere with their relationships. But before we get into how each of those patterns manifest in a relationship, it's important to note that we aren't always right about identifying which category of attachment best applies to us in our relationships. I will tell you, as I'm going over this, I see bits and pieces from several of the negative ones. I can definitely see the ambivalent anxious in my case. Also the avoidant. Both of those. There's kind of this blurred line between those two that maybe my dad vacillated back and forth between. And that's just my father's relationship. Then on mom had mom was a single mom a lot of my childhood before I went to live with my dad. And then she had a lot of guys come in and out of our lives that she was dating. And then she was very busy dating and not really attentive. I learned my mom was kind of a pushover because that was the kind of guys that she dated, was the guys who were a little more dominant. So I learned to become a little more dominant, but then I go live with my dad and he knocks that out of me. So it's like I had this yin and yang of so many like back and forth attachment patterns that I learned that by the time I got to become an adult, I couldn't even see straight. It was just spinning so much. In this article, we're going to try to illuminate what dismissive and preoccupied attachment styles look like, but also why it's challenging for people to correctly identify and determine their own attachment pattern. This process is beneficial because if a person can accurately identify what pattern they have, they can start to take the steps to form much more secure attachments, challenge all the defensive adaptations that you have created, and thus, this is the big part, you guys, enjoying a much closer, more satisfying relationship. Can I tell you, in 2020, I have made it a point to develop deep relationships with people. I have connected with not a lot of people. I don't think you go deep with a lot of people because most people don't go there. But for the people willing to go there, you should try to develop really sincere, no holds barred, talk about anything, no judgment kind of relationships. And right now I have about 6 of those that I'm really happy with, and 2 or 3 of them that are pretty strong. The other ones are still developing, but I think that's such a key to overcoming whatever attachment pattern you have, is being honest with yourself, being vulnerable, being willing to talk things out. I think it's helped that I'm going through some stuff personally in my life. And I'm also a good listener. And so I listen to the other person and we have nice conversations. And so that has been so helpful to me in 2020. Maybe I do a whole Jimmy Rants all about how you go deeper with people, because it does seem like there's a lot of people that like to stay on the shallow. And perhaps that's an attachment pattern that they learned. Everything you do is, oh, how's the weather? How's the sports? Who's your favorite political candidate? You just kind of talk about little surface value things and then nothing else. You never really get into real world stuff. And to me, I'm over the superficial and I only want the real world stuff. Like, to me, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where real relationships, real connections take place. And so if you have an attachment pattern that prevents you from having those, maybe force the issue a little bit. Go deep with somebody. I always warn people, hey, if we become friends and we start talking, I hope you're ready to go deep and go honest and blunt. And I hope you're blunt back to me, because I'm going to be blunt to you. Not ugly blunt, but not being afraid of offending the other person or anything like that. Those are kind of cool relationships. And I've had a bunch of those start to develop in 2020. It's been really neat. All right, so let's get to the first one. Dismissive attachment. When a child experiences an avoidant attachment pattern, they develop this thing called pseudo-independence. They learn to take care of themselves, or they self-parent. And again, I know some teenagers in my life that they basically have to parent themselves because their parents have become so ambivalent, avoidant, not really giving them any attention whatsoever, that they feel like they have to parent themselves. Skunk, are you going to talk on my Jimmy Rants again? Will you please shut up? She acts like I never give her attention, and then she goes crazy. All right, lick yourself. Calm yourself. There you go. Here, I'll lick myself too. Cats are fun when they're not fun, but I'll say they're fun. All right, so a pseudo-independence is what we were talking about. And so these kids feel like they have to be their own parent. And it's so sad. It's like the hope and dream of your heart is to have a kid, and then you have a kid, and then the kid grows up, and they're cutesy as a baby, and then toddler, and then early child years, and then they're going to elementary school and middle school, and then get to high school, and then, okay, yeah, I'm over them. I'm not ready for the teenage years, and so they just get ignored. Guys, that's sad to me. Teenagers do not need to be ignored. They need you then more than ever before. I did a Jimmy Rants a few days ago all about how teenagers start cutting themselves. And they start doing that as a coping mechanism because they're being avoided. This avoidant attachment pattern makes them feel pseudo-independent where they have to self-parent and take care of themselves. And if they can't deal with the emotional stress, they're cutting themselves. They're getting into drugs and alcohol and all the things. This is a symptom of this attachment pattern, this dismissive attachment. Their early environment triggered them to disconnect from their needs because it felt painful or shameful to experience them when they expressed them and they got no response. That's gotta suck. Disconnected from their needs because it was too painful or shameful to experience when they expressed them and then they got no response. What if a child is hungry and there's no food in the house for them to eat? And then they say, hey, I'm hungry. Can I have some food? And then the parents don't get food. How's that kid supposed to feel? And then they try to go buy some food at a convenience store, sneaking, behind the backs of their parents. Now that's neglect, and CPS should be called on those parents and the appropriate thing. But man, like these are real life examples, you guys, of things kids are going through. And then they take that childhood attachment pattern of being dismissed into adulthood. These adults, once they are dismissed as kids, as adults, these individuals maintain a total sense of disconnection as a way of protecting themselves from painful emotions. Think about that. The reason if you're dismissed as a kid, you have a tough time in relationships is you don't trust people. DTA was something I learned when I was younger. Don't trust anyone. And there's a lot of kids that turn into adults that DTA totally. And that doesn't serve them well. The reason they DTA is they want to protect their own emotional stability. If you DTA, you become cold to the world. No emotion, because if you get emotionally attached and then you could potentially get hurt again, you don't want that. The body's going to protect you from being harmed and will do whatever it has to do. So this is the psychological coping mechanism for dealing with being dismissed as a kid. Now as an adult, you're just detached and disconnect from people. You even denigrate others because they have needs that they're expressing. Because now them expressing their needs, you're kind of jealous. You're like, well, wait a minute. I expressed my needs when I was a kid and I didn't get them fulfilled. I got them ignored. So your needs, come on. And so you denigrate once you become an adult. As a result, they may feel blank or directionless in their relationship, in their relation to their wants. So when they have wants in their life, they're just like, okay. Not going to happen because it never has happened in my life. They start to have this fatalistic attitude. And I know some of the coping mechanism is, well, it just doesn't matter. Oh, I don't care. No, you care. And it does matter. But because you've been dismissed so much, you have to tell yourself you don't care or tell yourself it doesn't matter when it matters a lot and you care a lot and you just can't do anything about it. Am I hitting on somebody here? I feel like I am. I feel like I'm describing somebody's experience. Their desires also feel problematic or uncomfortable because of the shame they would feel to not have their wants fulfilled or their needs met. It's almost like when you were a kid and you were dismissed and you shared needs and they didn't get fulfilled, you were dismissed Now you feel shameful in your heart that you have wants and needs when you know the pattern for you is it's dismissed, it doesn't count, you don't matter, and that's how you act as an adult. God, I know so many people just like this. And they think the whole world is against them. They think they're not worthy of things that they want and desire. This is a big one, you guys. People with a dismissive attachment pattern tend to be a distancer in their relationship. So in a love relationship, they're the ones that start to pull away first when things start to get awry. Like I said, every relationship in the early days has this kind of honeymoon period where the other can do no wrong and we're all happy and but then real life sets in, and the first person that backs away is the one with the dismissive attachment pattern that they learned as a kid, because when you share wants and needs as a kid, you didn't get them fulfilled, and so now you don't want to share wants and needs because you're afraid you're going to be rejected again, and so you're the one that starts to pull away. They may be more emotionally unavailable and even want to be alone. I just want to be alone. Give me my me time. I want to be alone. We know those people too. Their partners may complain that they are not there for them, or they're interested in meeting their wants and needs. This is interesting. Like it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Once someone has dismissive attachment pattern, even in the midst of a partner saying, hey, I will provide all your needs and wants, just let's be there for each other. That's why we got married. And no, that's not what they know. They stick with what they know. This is in large part because a dismissively attached individual has learned to be self-sufficient and self-contained. And so if somebody has learned to basically be self-contained and everything that they get and want and need in life will only be provided by them and nobody else, that's a recipe for disaster in a relationship. Since they've learned to shield their own wants and needs from others, they have trouble understanding when someone else wants and needs something from them. Oh, that's horrible. And I hope if you're a parent today, that you're not dismissing your kids, that you're not ignoring their wants and needs, because all this that I'm reading right now is the ramifications of neglect and failing to give the kids what they need in their life and even the things that they want. They learn that they're unworthy. Man, I know so many people like this. I know you do too. People with a dismissive avoidant attachment tend to be more inward. They deny the importance of being close to someone else. They don't see value in that. They may be psychologically defended and easily inclined to shut down emotionally. These are the ones that are stoic. Like really bad news can happen, stoic. Really happy news can happen, stoic. What is that Addams Family character? The girl, was it Wednesday? Was that her name? Anyway, whoever the Addams Family little girl was, she was just always stoic. And I remember seeing a meme that showed happy, sad, mad, angry, and it was all Spock from Star Trek, and he's like the same picture in every one, but his emotions were the same regardless. And so that's these people that have that dismissive avoidant attachment. They may struggle to identify or understand the emotional needs of others and themselves. Some people find it easy to label their partner as having a dismissive attachment pattern. However, listen to this. It's not always easy to see this pattern when it's in you. For example, when someone with a dismissive attachment pattern feels a need, they often assume they're being too needy instead of realizing it's a basic human response. Is that you? Do you feel guilty about having needs and wants in your life? Do you feel like you're too needy? In addition, you may feel aloof or like the distancer when they're being pursued by their partner, but if they feel rejected, they may feel extremely anxious. They may be a distancer in their relationship, but when their partner pulls away, they start to become insecure and they pursue them, which is the wrong thing to do when someone's trying to distance and they get pursued. They're like, why do you have wants and needs? I don't have wants and needs. You shouldn't have wants and needs. And so therefore, leave me alone. I just want to be alone. Don't come in here. I want to be alone. I need some me time. And me time becomes days, months, years. Do you see how this manifests from childhood attachment patterns all the way into adulthood, into who you are today? Pretty fascinating. Babies who are identified as having an avoidant attachment style often showed little outward reaction to a parent's absence. Most babies bawl like crazy when a parent leaves, but not ones that have an avoidant attachment style. However, a heart monitor revealed that they have an elevated heart rate as their marker of anxiety. So they show no reaction, but their heart rate becomes elevated. So they do have a reaction, just not an outward one. Similarly, an adult with a dismissive attachment still experiences anxiety and still wants that security, but their learned mode of relating is clouding their natural desires and tolerance for closeness. They feel unclear about what they want and need from others, and they're afraid of the unbearable shame of not feeling important enough to attend to. Because of all this confusion, they may incorrectly identify that they are anxious as their attachment pattern. The conclusion I'm making so far is if you didn't have a secure attachment pattern as a kid, you're going to have some psychological responses in your relationships, and I would dare say probably some problems with things in the way you see yourself that maybe it makes you a habitual dieter. Well, you don't look good enough, you're not healthy enough, so you got to just keep dieting. That's one manifestation that this could bring on. And it's all the more important if you're a parent today to give those kids that secure environment in your home. All right, let's get to the next one, attachment pattern. Preoccupied attachment. A person with a preoccupied attachment is often seen as the pursuer in a relationship. They may feel like they need to make an active effort to get what they want, and therefore can sometimes engage in behavioral patterns that make them clingy, controlling, or even intrusive. Because they're not used to having their needs met consistently or in an attuned or sensitive manner, they may feel insecure. They're the ones that are also the most jealous, and they're also nervous about the state of their relationship. You know anybody in your life that has a jealous spouse to the point that they don't even want their husband or wife talking to someone or going out even to the store? Well, what are they going to do where they're at? And so they're anxious, insecure, jealous, nervous, all about the relationship. They may have a tendency to look to their partner to come rescue or complete them. Ooh, that's a little bit of codependence, where if you can't be somewhat self-sufficient on your own and you need your partner to basically be the other half of you, that's a slippery slope. An anxiously attached person assumes they want closeness, but then they engage in patterns that actually leave a certain amount of emotional turmoil and distance. Although they may perceive themselves as feeling real love toward their partner, they may actually be experiencing emotional hunger. Their actions, which are often based on desperation or insecurity, exacerbate their own fears of being rejected. When their partner does come closer or gives them what they want, they react in unconscious ways to push them away. Isn't that ironic? The deepest desire of their heart is to have closeness and being needy and being rescued and complete. And yet once they get what they want, then they do the exact opposite. They push that away and say no. They may find their true tolerance for intimacy is much smaller than they thought it was, because real love and closeness would challenge that core belief about themselves and their relationships. Therefore, while they may believe they want security, they actually feel compelled to stay in a state of anxiety. That seems so weird because anxiety is an uncomfortable position. You're kind of in flux when you're in anxiety. You're anxious about something, and then when that anxiety is taken away, you can't have that taken away because your identity becomes the anxiety, and so you push away the thing that would relieve the anxiety that you're having from being dismissed. And yet by pushing away, you're keeping that anxiety that you don't like, but now you like because it's familiar. Is your head spinning yet? Because all of this is happening in real time in a lot of people. In general, someone with an insecure attachment pattern on either side of a spectrum can leave us with skewed ideas about ourselves and how others are likely to treat us and how much love and care we deserve. A dismissive person may believe they need more space, while a preoccupied person may think they need more closeness. In reality, though, most of us maintain a fundamental belief that we are unworthy and incapable of getting the love we want and need, so we form core defenses in order to uphold that belief. In other words, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, what we believe. If we think we're unworthy and incapable of getting the love we want and need, and then we start getting the love we want and need, and we push that love we want and need away, we have just become a self-fulfilling prophecy of what we think about ourselves. Guys, this is hopefully eye-opening for you, groundbreaking, making you kind of look at, what makes you tick and why you act the way you do. Evaluate this. Think about what I'm sharing here today, because this is just so good. If we can be open to knowing what our attachment pattern is and learning the behaviors that get in the way of having the love we say we want, we can start to forge a path towards security, having stronger, healthier relationships, more rewarding long-term ones as well. We can challenge our old way of thinking about ourselves and begin to internalize a brand new image of ourselves as both lovable and worthy of love. Powerful, powerful stuff, you guys. And I got to tell you, I have been kind of digging deep into my own attachment pattern. I recognize I was abused as a child. I recognize a lot of the way I see the world, and in relationships, and all kinds of relationships, friendships, love relationships, business relationships, all relationships. How I see the world was basically formed by how I was treated when I was a kid. And you can recognize it and then realize you can overcome some of those coping mechanisms that you put into place. I had one more article related to this. Let's see, we got a few more minutes from Good Housekeeping. I'm trying to see if there's anything in there that might be different. Identifying the avoidant attachment style, dismissive avoidant, and fearful or anxious avoidant. The style usually makes them go independent, go it alone. As we were saying, they often maintain strict boundaries in their life. They can be emotionally distant and have a hard time opening up. A person who has a fearful avoidant attachment style has a balancing act to do. These people have a fear of being abandoned, so they may give off mixed signals, pushing their partner away, but then pulling them back in later on. They also have few close friendships because they're fearful they're going to lose them and then be all alone. So if you don't have many friendships, you hold on to the ones you can hang on to. How can you tell if someone is avoidant? This is kind of cool here. Keeping the relationship shallow or surface level. That's someone who has an avoidant attachment pattern. Focusing on sexual intimacy without having an emotional closeness. That's obviously in a love relationship. Running hot and cold with their affection. Sometimes they're close, sometimes they're distant. Goes back and forth. This is someone who is an avoidant. Pulling away when someone starts to get close. Resisting becoming vulnerable. So key. And then repeatedly sabotaging their relationships. If you shy away from intimacy, feel trapped by it, or it makes you angry, you often think about breaking up with your partner or regret breaking up with your partner after some time. You probably have this avoidant detachment style. So what causes this avoidant attachment style? They come by it honestly. They learn from their parents at a very early age. Parents of children who grow up avoidant are emotionally unavailable. So see, just like the abuse becomes generational, my dad was abused by his dad, and then he abused me. And so it's generational. Same with the attachment style. An avoidant attachment, basically they learned that's how you act and treat kids. And so the parents of the children who grew up are emotionally unavailable and unresponsive for much of the time, which then the kids learn not to rely on getting any affection from their parent. Studies show these parents disregard or ignore their children's needs. They discourage crying, oh, don't be a sissy, and leading those children to become unusually independent at a very early age. And I would even say that if they have a younger sibling, they end up parenting the younger sibling. I've seen this happen a lot too. When the parent checks out at some point and the older kid has to be the mommy to the younger kid, that's a sign of avoidant attachment. Because they weren't rewarded for sharing emotions when they were kids, avoidant adults also have a hard time showing that as they grow older. Identifying these roots is a great place to start when determining if your partner is avoidant. This will help you see those patterns objectively as primarily a reaction to your environment as young children. So, how do you work on this? They say that you need to journal. That would be a good thing. Meditate, and then do intimacy exercises. This is, of course, in a love relationship as a couple. In addition, seek therapy as a great way to dig deeper into all these insecurities with the help of a professional. You can also seek out relationships with someone with a secure attachment. So if someone came from a very strong, secure attachment pattern in their childhood, that would be somebody good to hook up with. They also suggest working towards vulnerable communication slowly because it can take practice. If you're not used to opening up to people, that can be scary. But if you do it a little bit at a time, you can get there. Focus on taking one vulnerable action, one, every single day, like admitting a weakness or asking your partner to help. Finally, get in touch with how you're feeling when your partner wants to get closer and try to push back against that urge to pull away. Acknowledge that you have a thought you want to pull away. Acknowledge that you're not comfortable. Choose to communicate with the partner and then retain that connection, even though you might still be actively in discomfort in the midst of that. This is how you're going to change the wiring in your brain to make your emotional brain accept and make change happen. So what do you guys think about this childhood attachment pattern? You learned it. You learned how to interact with people as a kid, and then you took it into adulthood, and that's how you interact with people today. And you could be 40, 50, 60, 70 years old today, and how you act and interact and your quirks about who you are in your relationships with people, all of that's predicated on what you learned as a kid all those years ago. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. I'm going to go to Instagram first, then over to Facebook, finally over to YouTube. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is a website, and as always, if you love my show, go donate through the Patreon link or through the PayPal link over at JimmyRants.com. Keto Court says this is going to be good. This is my favorite, or you're my favorite in 2020. Thank you, Keto Court. Jack says my parents raised me to be pretty independent. I wonder, Jax, they raised you to be independent, or as they discussed here, did you learn to adapt, which made you independent because you weren't having some needs met? I'm not saying they didn't raise you to be independent. You probably did. But I'm saying, I wonder how much of that independence that you have, self-sufficiency that you have, is based on this avoidant attachment pattern. I don't know anything about your childhood, so I have no idea, but it's interesting that you would say your parents raised you to be that way, but I wonder how much the way they raised you and maybe did not always attend to your needs actually influenced how independent you got. Keto Court says, I've been married 11 years to a wonderful man, exact opposite of who my dad was. I still find it hard to trust his love is unconditional. I had to earn everything good with my dad, so it's hard to change. You are nailing it. I had a hard time for a long time. I craved love and attention and respect and kudos for job well done. I craved that because I never got it. So when you don't get it, you could go one of two ways. You could just say, well, that's just the way it is. You don't get praised when you do good things, so thus you don't even try to do good things. Or you try to do good things to the nth degree, and you're always seeking that attention and approval. Well, good for your man in your life, and congratulations on 11 years of marriage, showing you how it's done. Because now you know, as an adult, the kind of love you should have got when you were kids. Oh, Anita says, you're one of my favorites. Keep being you. Thank you. I love being me, and I love sharing, and I love kind of doing all the work that I get to do on a daily basis. Keto Court says, I think this is helpful to recognize our own pattern as well as in those we're in relationships with. It could definitely help me understand why people act how they do and not to take things so personal. Yes, like if you know that person that has that one where they withdraw for a period of time and they want to be alone, leave me alone, and then suddenly they want to be close and they don't want to let you go, they're so close, but then they'll leave me alone. You kind of go, all right, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde here, but now you know why they had that. Joshua says, ambivalent, anxious for myself, and I think as a result of bullying, it was my defense. And I don't like shallow people either. Yeah. The bullying is probably another one of those things that you allowed to happen as a coping mechanism as well for how things happened at home. It's crazy. Britt says you're hitting close to home. Good. When I read this, I thought somebody's going to be impacted. Somebody needed to hear this today. I was glad to share this. My needs didn't get met, and I was taught I was weaker and a burden for even having any needs. Makes it hard to even ask for anything as an adult and break that mentality. Yeah, I wonder if the people that don't like asking for money when they have a need, I wonder if it comes from this kind of concept that you didn't have that when you were a kid. You weren't getting your needs met. So now it's kind of weird. If you need money, you don't ask for money. We all know those people as well. All right, thank you, Instagram. Let's pop over here now. I'll move you guys back a little bit. Pop over here now to my Facebook page, see what you guys have to say, move you guys a little closer. What's up, Facebook? Let's see what kind of comments you have for me. Marcella says, sounds textbook avoidant. Yes. Tracy says, being a survivor of sexual abuse from before kindergarten until 12, I'm very guarded now. I can imagine. My mother did not get divorced, and I had to see him every day until I left the house. Now I'm 52, working on letting people in more. It's not easy, but it gets better. Yeah, I mean, I'm 48, about to turn 49 in a couple months. I'm just now letting go of some of those attachment patterns that I had. So it does take time, but good for you, Tracy, overcoming horrific stuff in your childhood. I'm proud of you. You should be very proud of yourself. Candace says, intergenerational trauma is a problem. I'm a survivor, and by association, my child has had to be a survivor of my trauma. It's a vicious cycle. Parents, heal yourself so your children don't suffer needlessly. I'm working on it. Nobody's perfect. Love yourself. Nurture the inner child. Tell them their suffering isn't their fault. Tell them you love them and how you see them as brave. From a healthy attachment with yourself. Form a healthy attachment with yourself. Very well stated, Candace. And yeah, some of these kids I'm thinking about in my own life have a lot of that going on. The parents just haven't dealt with their trauma. And until a parent deals with their own trauma, that's what happened with my dad, by the way. He's 70 years old now, 71, whatever he is. And he's never dealt with his trauma. And to this day, he denies the trauma he inflicted on me. And so, if you don't deal with your stuff, You're going to pass along the bad stuff that you did or had done to you when you were a kid. So good for you kind of working on all that, Candace, and thank you for your encouraging words today. Tracy says, I never got therapy because the therapist said a child my age would forget it. Oh, wow. A 5 to 12-year-old and you would forget it? He got therapy when he passed. I do have to say I felt freedom, but I do not trust as easily. Yeah. I have MS and Hashimoto's, two incurable, or what is HS? I said Hashimoto's. What is HS? Multiple sclerosis, and what's the HS mean? 2 incurable progressive autoimmune diseases. I felt guilty or feel guilty expressing needs to my health team, even in acute situations, because I know they have their own stresses. I feel needy because there are people who suffer worse than I do, even though on paper what I experience would be pretty unbearable for anyone. I think a lot of this kind of attachment pattern that's a negative one does manifest physically. So I would argue, Candace, probably the development of those 2 autoimmune conditions actually was a result of the trauma you had from those attachment patterns. So sorry you are going through that, but you at least have self-awareness about it. Most people, they don't even put 2 and 2 together to know that there is a relationship between them. Thank you, Facebook. Let me go over here now to YouTube, see what you guys have to say. What's up, YouTube? Adina says, crazy cat man. Yes, I have cats. One over here, one over there. One of them just goes crazy. How do I get notified of your lives? Well, if you go to youtube.com/livinglowcarbman, you can subscribe and then hit the bell. Make sure you hit the bell and then you'll get notifications. If you've already done that, some people on YouTube have complained that it's now in the kids category, so you don't get notified. Unsubscribe and then resubscribe and then hit the bell again and you will get the notifications for all of the Jimmy Rants. But I am here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, every single day. So just be there, be square. Kim says, I'll probably never have another partner because no one's ever wanting to put any effort into a relationship. They think it should just happen. Well, that's not everybody. There are people willing to put in effort. So don't give up. Don't give up. Thanks for the flashback to my college days. Yeah. We all had our days in college. I was so awkward in college. It wasn't even funny because I didn't know the ways of the world. And college was pretty much my time to get away from my abuser and to just kind of figure out life. Joshua says there's a book called When the Body Says No that talks about the emotional and mental abuse and pain that manifests as disease. When the Body Says No. Thank you for that. There's another one that I was researching when I started doing my childhood trauma, started talking about that. I'm trying to remember. The Body Keeps Score, I think is that one. And it's the same kind of thing. It talks about how your trauma does manifest physically in the body. And of course, there's the whole ACE study, ACE, Adverse Childhood Event Study, where they put the connection between a lot of chronic diseases that people deal with and the relationship to childhood trauma as well. So lots of great resources. But guys, did you learn something here today about childhood attachment pattern? Did you recognize a pattern in people you know and love? Maybe in yourself. They say it's hard to identify it in yourself, but if you see it in other people, maybe it behooves you to say, hey, I was listening to this guy on his show and he was talking about this and I think you might have this. Can we do some research on this? I think it could be helpful because there are people that they go their whole lives and they flail because they're not able to figure out why they act the way they do. They just don't. Cade says, my customers would benefit so much to hear you talk. Well, thank you. Send them my way. I'm here 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. But yeah, I love bringing these kinds of topics because this is kind of non-traditional topics. I could just talk about keto and fasting and cholesterol and all that. But sometimes this kind of stuff, this might be why you still deal with weight. This might be why you have autoimmune conditions. Might be why you have chronic disease. You have high insulin and blood sugar that just never comes under control. If you ain't dealing with the way you were treated as a kid, it's going to manifest physically in the body. It has to. It has to. That's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. And as always, you can engage live in the content. You got to go follow me right here. I'm on Instagram at Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, engage live. We are here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So thank you so much for being here. We also simulcast over on Facebook and on YouTube. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay over here on IGTV. So go check it out. As soon as this is over, it'll go right up to IGTV. We also put the past episodes up over on YouTube. Type in a keyword, Jimmy Rants, you will find the show. We also have a special bonus episode over on YouTube today. It's my podcast that airs today called Real Talk with Carmen Hunter is her name. Speaking of, she's a survivor of childhood trauma. And she and I went way, way deep on this topic of childhood trauma and how it can manifest physically in the body. You're not going to want to miss this. So go watch it over as the Jimmy Rants bonus episode over on YouTube, or you can listen at llvlc.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And then finally, we have the official website for this show. JimmyRants.com is the website. See all the past episodes there. You can also support my work through the Patreon link or through the PayPal link that's there at JimmyRants.com. Cade says we're hosting a summit. One of the topics is keto and fasting. Could I shoot you a message to ask about participating? Guys, do I know anything about keto and fasting? Gee, I wonder if I know anything about keto and fasting. Absolutely. So just reach out to me through DM here on Instagram, and I'll be happy to reach out. I love being interviewed. I love interviewing, but it's so much fun to be on the other end of a conversation, being interviewed. And I always like to have fun with it. I always also don't want to know what they're going to ask. I'm best basically when I do extemporaneous, and I have no idea what's coming. Because obviously, if you don't know your stuff well enough to be able to answer literally any question, you have no business being interviewed on somebody's summit. So yes, Kate, I would be delighted to talk to you about that. So, all right, guys, that's it for now. We will be back again tomorrow. Ask me anything. That's your chance to ask your questions that are burning about keto, fasting, cholesterol, podcasting, book writing, being famous online, being silly, doing a daily live show in front of people, all that stuff. Just ask your questions. We'll be back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. We'll see you then.